Thank you for having me.
You were in an unusual position during this. You have spoken with the Iranians in your life. You have negotiated with them on nuclear issues. You were part of that, I guess they call it JCPOA, that agreement that Iran was in before. As you put yourself in the shoes of the people now, who do you think they're negotiating with? A guy? What a guy are they talking to?
So John, you're absolutely right. I was part of the team that President Obama sent for secret negotiations with the Iranians for several months, paving the way for the Iran nuclear deal. One of the guys I actually negotiated with is the guy you see on TV all the time now, their foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, one of the few Iranians that's still showing his face publicly. I actually have a good story about a guy versus the guy. During those negotiations, President Obama wanted the opportunity to speak to the then president of Iran, President Rouhani. And in our secret negotiations, I had a contact with one of the Iranian officials. And he gave me a cell phone number to give to the Situation Room for President Obama to be connected with President Rouhani. So I hand over the cell phone, and I'm standing there in the Oval Office while the call's being connected, and I have a thought. Have I just connected the president to like a Canadian shock jock or some random other person? Or is this actually the president of Iran? And I'm going back through my head, what's the chain of custody of this phone number? And in the end, the Iranians put out a statement saying, in fact, their president had spoken to our president. So it was all confirmed. And I was like, all good. But
what if it was like a girl at a bar who's like, sure, here's my number.
Can you imagine this amazing moment in the White House,
right?
President of the United States speaking to the president of Iran for the first time since 1979, a possibility of a real diplomatic breakthrough.
Right.
And I'm standing there just sweating bullets like, oh my God, what have I done?
Yes.
Turned out okay. But look, it to me is a damn shame, and you said this in your opening, that it's really hard to know who to credit with their account. The Iranians say there is no communication. The President of the United States says there is. You'd want to believe the President of the United States over hardline clerics in Iran. But the reality is probably there's some kind of messages getting passed without real conversations happening, at least not yet.
In the times that you had dealt with the Iranians for the JCPOA and then again dealing with them during the Biden administration, how close did we come to physical escalating into war, into bombing? 4 years of the Biden administration, we didn't get them back into the JCPOA. We didn't do any of those things. How untrustworthy a regime are they? Do sanctions work? Like, it doesn't seem like there are any good solutions.
Well, first, I would just say, Reagan said to the Soviets, trust but verify.
Right.
I always said when it came to the Iranians, don't trust and verify. And you had to do that all the way through. And when we got the Iran nuclear deal in the Obama administration, it had deep verification built into it. Inspectors on the ground over every inch of Iran's nuclear infrastructure to make sure they were complying.
Did they comply with that? Because the scuttlebutt from a couple of guys is that they didn't. And that's why, and we gave them billions of dollars that they used for Hamas and Hezbollah. Is that what happened in your mind?
They got sanctions relief as a result of the deal, but yes, John, they were complying with the deal. Even the Israeli intelligence,
even in the nuclear facilities, you guys had people there.
They were complying with the agreement. And then in 2018, President Trump pulled out of it, said, this is the worst deal in human history. Mm-hmm. If that's true, that is quite remarkable, because there's been a lot of deals in human history.
Well, he also said that about
the worst one.
Trade with Canada,
yeah,
so
right,
you have
exactly.
to temper it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he pulls out of the deal.
Right.
And you're right, in the 4 years of the Biden administration, we got close at various points. We negotiated to get back in, but we couldn't get back in part because the Iranians said, wait a second, we did a deal with Obama.
Right.
Trump pulled out of it. How do we know that if you come in, you're not going to pull out of it again? Then Trump comes back. And when Trump comes back, there is actually an opportunity to do a deal because he's the guy who pulled out. And just a few days before we started bombing Iran, the Iranians put a proposal on the table in Geneva that went a long way towards resolving the nuclear issue. And my understanding is that our side, our negotiators, simply didn't understand what they were being offered, and they ignored it and decided to go ahead and strike.
Our guys didn't understand. Was it in Farsi? What? I don't. What do you mean they didn't understand? Like, they didn't understand the Iranians negotiating code?
Well, if you listen to the way that our the Trump administration officials who were involved in this spoke about what the Iranians were proposing, there's a mismatch between that and what the mediators, the Omani mediators, said was actually on the table.
Right.
So I think
Well, the Trump administration said that Iran was threatening them by suggesting that they had a lot of enriched uranium. And apparently the Omani said, no, they weren't threatening you. They were just telling you what they had.
Telling you what they had, and also saying we're prepared to downblend that uranium, which basically means render it so that it's no longer fit for purpose to be turned into a weapon.
You know, you cut it with baking soda. I've been around. I know what you do with the enriched uranium.
So at the end of the day,
right.
and I thought the way you laid out your opening segment with the total obliteration was so powerful, because you can strike Iran's nuclear program.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they still have a stockpile of enriched uranium. They still have centrifuges lying around various facilities we may not even know about.
Right.
And they still have scientists who know how to put all that together.
So this gets us to the interesting point about belligerent countries and about belligerent nations, and that is the difference between capability and ambition. And I think we're seeing that now with Netanyahu. By the way, when you were in office, how many times did you have to say to Netanyahu, like, don't bomb that? Like, do they listen? You know, I was so struck. This is a tangent. He seems f***ing nuts. Like, it's the kind of thing. I remember when Russia bombed Ukraine, and you guys came out with very powerful statements. These are war crimes. You're against that. And then Netanyahu bombs Gaza and kills thousands and thousands of civilians, and the U.S. is like, hey, guys, be cool. Like, it's so weird to me that we don't take... Why is that?
Well, there's a couple things. I mean, first, historically, the U.S. has been harder on our enemies than we've been on our friends, and that's true across the board. But secondly, John, the devastation in Gaza, the killing of civilians, the harm, the suffering, the pain, was something we tried to get up every day to end the war, and we didn't end it fast enough. But when we left office, we did have a ceasefire in place, and that's what we handed off to the troops.
But we don't, there's no conditions we can say, like, you know, no bombing. Those are our bombs. We give them those weapons. We can't dictate, because I don't know the end game. Like, right now, he's bombing Iran, but he's also still bombing in Gaza. And now he's decided to invade southern Lebanon or bomb that. Again, it gets to, you can degrade capability, but all you're doing is creating more ambition. And how is that a recipe for a lasting peace?
Well, we had someone on our podcast a couple weeks ago named Danny Centrenowitz, who is the Israeli Defense Forces intelligence lead for Iran, was that for 15 years. And what he basically said was, when it comes to Iran, what Israel would like to do under this particular government is just break Iran, cause chaos. Because as far as they're concerned, a broken Iran is less of a threat to Israel. Now, the United States of America cannot think about it that way, because a broken Iran means a broken global economy because they continue to threaten the Straits of Hormuz. It means a potential refugee flow like we saw after the war in Syria into Europe. It means a lot else besides. So I do believe that when it comes to this war in Iran, there is a real divergence between Israel's ultimate aims and the United States' ultimate aims. And part of the challenge we've seen is that when we ask, what is the administration doing, they can't answer that question because they don't know why they're there in the first place. They haven't been able to give us an answer as to what this is all about.
But look, I don't go along the route of, because I know there's now all the theories like Israel is wagging the dog. I never bought that. I feel like they're a convenient scapegoat for the United States to continue our imperialistic adventures in that part of the world. And I want to ask you, because it really does, what strikes me as maybe, I don't want to say the fatal flaw in American foreign policy, and I want to ask you if you guys have wrestled with this, is the difference between, we talked about capability and ambition, but what about influence and control? I think America hasn't figured out the difference between trying to influence events and control it. And our policies in the Middle East, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, have shown an inability to understand the repercussions of those actions, whereas China doesn't seem to fall into that trap. What do you think of that for us?
I basically agree with you. And when President Biden was
I did not see that coming.
When President Biden was elected, one of the charges he gave all of us was end America's longest war in Afghanistan.
Right.
And do not put the United States uniformed military, men and women, back into war in the Middle East or anywhere else if it can possibly be avoided. That was his charge. And we did end the war in Afghanistan, and it was painful, and it was brutal, and it was tragic. But when we left office, America was not at war for the first time in 25 years. And one of the reasons that President Biden gave for why he wanted to do that is because China was extremely happy to see the United States tied down in war in the Middle East while they went around the world with their largesse, trying to win influence, as you said. And I think we do need to turn the page on the forever wars, move forward to compete where competition matters in infrastructure and technology and economic development. But I would also say that in that post 9/11 period, John, we did a lot of good things too. Every administration did. If you look at the question of global health or people coming out of poverty or people gaining literacy all over the world, those indicators are all up, and that is because, in no small part, because of the United States of America. So,
in no way, though, over these last, if you were to look back on these last, let's say, 25 years, the reputation of the United States is not, they'll come in and really help us take care of poverty. The reputation of the United States is they'll bomb the shit out of you from wherever. Maybe they'll stay for a little while. Maybe they won't. They'll tell you, like with the Kurds, we'll arm you and we'll support you, and then we'll fucking abandon you. Or we'll tell, like, where is our credibility on the world stage given the just unbelievable chaos that we've unleashed? I think we're generally responsible for the right populist swing in Europe. Because if we hadn't done Libya and we hadn't done Iraq and all those different things, would they be flooded with refugees in those moments?
I think Libya certainly contributed to that. So did Syria.
Right.
Of course, the difference between Libya and Syria is in Libya, we did take military action. In Syria, we didn't.
Right.
And in both cases, you ended up with
Well, we
these
did,
massive...
though, in Syria. We just didn't talk about it. We were arming Al-Nusra Front and all those other... They were being armed. I remember running into, it was so weird. I was in Amman, Jordan, we were doing a film, and it's all Emiratis in the hotel. It was the Hyatt that had been bombed previously, although they'd really patched that up when I was staying there. My room, you could barely tell. And it's Ramadan, and it's all Emiratis, and there's this one table of, like, dudes who very clearly were, like, raised in Nebraska and had the crew cuts. So I go over to their table, and I go, hey, man, what are you doing here? And the guy looks at me and he goes, we're not here. And I was just like, and then I just got cold. But we do that. And we do interfere in all these places, and somewhat cavalier nature. And then when it blows back on us, we're like, well, I guess we're just gonna abandon that project. But it seems like we haven't changed the approach.
Well, what I find really interesting is that in his first term, President Trump said, basically, I don't want to get involved in these foreign
Not doing anything,
President Biden comes along, ends the war in Afghanistan. The United States is basically out of the business of directly U.S. forces in these countries fighting wars. President Trump runs in 2024 saying, I'm going to be the peace candidate, gets awarded the FIFA Peace Prize a few weeks ago.
Very prestigious.
Very prestigious. And then turns around and says, no, I'm getting right back into this game. And the question is why? And I think a lot of it is that the appetite for him has grown with the eating. He did the bombing of the nuclear facility last year, total obliteration, as he put it.
Yes.
He does Maduro. He doesn't feel there are a lot of consequences, to your point about consequences and blowback. He doesn't feel that, at least not immediately. There are those of us like you who are warning at the time, there's going to be a bill to be paid for this down the road. He didn't see that. So then he thinks, I can go to war against Iran on a basis that could be up to and including regime change, and the Iranians aren't going to do anything in response. Therefore, I don't even need to prepare to protect the Strait of Hormuz. And that, I think, has been the fundamental flaw here, a belief that despite all the evidence we have from Iraq and Afghanistan, that when we get into these kinds of Middle Eastern wars, they do not work out well for us, and we need to turn the page on them.
Forget about Middle Eastern wars, South American wars, Central American wars. We are a regime change machine all over the world, and we're so overly extended. When you were there, does each president have, is there like a little, like Iran, like there's a library, And I'm assuming it's done alphabetically, but so Iran and then obviously Iraq, probably thicker book. But they sit next to each other, and doesn't it say, when you pull it out, the work of 30 years of analysts, here's what's going to happen here, here's what's going to happen here. Don't they game this stuff out ad infinitum?
Ad infinitum. Yes.
So and he knows that. The president must know that.
Well, what was interesting is there were a number of newspaper stories in the days leading up to this war, because we could see it coming from weeks away as we built up for it.
Right.
Where it was military officials, including the most senior military officials in the Pentagon, basically being quoted on background saying, we have misgivings about this because of the potential response we could see from Iran. But President Trump did not listen to that. And my supposition for why is because he was on a high from the 12-day war last year and the Maduro raid, and he basically thought, I can do Iran's weak. I can do this. They're not going to respond. They didn't respond last year. They're not going to respond this year. And it wouldn't just be the military, but the intelligence community would have told him, you start waving the possibility of regime change in Iran, these guys are going to rightly consider that existential, and they're going to do whatever they can to respond. You know, I said earlier that the United States doesn't know why it's in this war. And I really believe that because they've given 9 different explanations, the administration. Iran knows why it's doing what it's doing.
Right.
It's trying to raise the cost on Donald Trump so that he ultimately stops bombing.
Well, you see immediately, as soon as gas prices go up to $3.79, he's like, we're done. We fixed it. Everything is good again.
So they have a coherent and clear strategy that they are pursuing here. And at the moment, we have the opposite of that.
You really think he believes that he cracked the code and now he's invincible? I swear to God, I knew people, cocaine did this to them. This is the same. This is how a cocaine person acts. A cocaine person is just like, I'm the best. No, I can't be stopped. That's what we have.
I couldn't put it better. Yes.
Well, thank you. Well, your podcast, they go over all this stuff. You got to check out his podcast, The Long Game, with Jake Sullivan and John Feiner. Jake Sullivan, thank you for joining us.